Queen Victoria and the Jews by D.J. Benjamin. Published in the Hebrew Standard, Thursday, May 20th, 1948. This is the Hebrew Standard of Australasia from Sydney, New South Wales. Empire Day, which falls next week, has gone somewhat out of fashion. Many are unaware even of the reason for the choice of May 24th. The British Empire of the 19th century, prosperous, powerful, and serene, kept the Queen's birthday as a holiday. To those who sought a day which would keep alive the Queen's memory and unite her subjects in a common celebration, the anniversary of her birth in 1819 was the obvious choice. Jews as well as Christians and the many other religious groups of the empire joined in doing honor to her and to the conceptions which she embodied. It is still not too late to think of her this Empire Day, and as we do, we may ponder her attitude towards the Jews, which was so typical not only of her age but of our own. During the 63 years of Queen Victoria's reign, Jewry in England grew in stature as well as in number. When she ascended the throne in 1837, there were probably 40,000 Jews in the British Isles. At her death in 1901, there were well over 150,000. By the commencement of her reign, the Jews had granted most civil rights, except in Parliament and the universities. When she died, the so-called civil disabilities of the Jews had gone. They were remembered only as the title of an essay by Macaulay and as a page of history. It is of interest to think for a moment, what were the views held on the subject by the great lady who gave her name to the age? One of the Queen's foremost characteristics was tolerance in a rather narrow way. She would not have dreamt of trying to suppress the practice of any religion, yet she had a dread of Catholicism and a firm dislike of Judaism. In her feelings towards Jews there was no dread, but there was an objection, indefinable, perhaps superstitious. Yet it was tempered with her ever-present sympathy for the oppressed. Her objections, it seems, were to Judaism rather than to Jews. To prove this, one needs cite only her relationship with Disraeli, a Jew by birth, a Christian by religion. She never raised the point of his origin. Yet Disraeli had never concealed it and referred to it in his letters to her. Quote, "The greatest fault was her obstinate prejudice," unquote, one biographer wrote, in the political influence of Queen Victoria. Hardy, page 29. And that statement summarizes her attitude to Jews. The Queen was an intelligent woman, even if she did not think deeply, but she had an upbringing like most children of her age, which gave her prejudices she could never overcome. Perhaps an anti-Jewish prejudice was strange in the daughter of Edward, Duke of Kent, whose liking and sympathy for Jews earned him the dedication of a work called Hebrew Ritual in 1819, the year of the Queen's birth. Prejudice, however, outweighed sympathy, which she did not lack. Whenever Jews were persecuted, she was willing to assist them, either by helping the journeys of Sir Moses Montefiore or by instigating the publication of an article attacking the persecutors, as she did, for instance, during a Hungarian pogrom in 1883. Her interest and feelings for the work of Sir Moses Montefiore was shown in tangible form. Before he left for his visit to Damascus in 1840, the Queen gave him an audience, which materially raised the prestige of his humanitarian journey. In recognition of his success, he was accorded, with the Queen's approval, supporters to his coat of arms. In the return in 1844 from a mission to the Tsar on behalf of the suffering Jews of Russia, the Queen created him a baronet, the first Jew so honored. Some idea of her feelings can be gauged from the letter written by Sir Robert Peel, then Prime Minister, informing Sir Moses of the baronetcy. Quote, This mark of royal favor is bestowed upon you in consideration of your high character and eminent position in the ranks of a loyal and estimable class of Her Majesty's subjects, agreeing with you in religious profession, and in the hope that it may aid your truly benevolent efforts to improve the social conditions of the Jew in other countries by temperate appeals to the justice and humanity of their rulers. Close quote. Goodman. Moses Montefiore, page 95. There was another audience after his return from his mission to Morocco in 1864, which he had undertaken with the Queen's support. Goodman, page 146. One should mention here that Anne Skye's story, Moses Montefiore, from Israel, the First Jewish Omnibus, page 948, is a mere fantasy. In Home Affairs, the Queen controversial question, that's the chief controversial question, which affected Jews, was their right to sit in Parliament. Although the agitation went on for years and several bills were introduced to enable Jews to take their seats in the Commons, none of the Queen's published letters deal with the point, and her numerous biographers are silent. There is, however, ample information on her attitude to Jews in the House of Lords. In August of 1869, the Prime Minister, Mr. Gladstone, suggested the creation of 10 new peers in order to increase the government's representation. One of the names in Gladstone's list was that of Baron Lionel de Rothschild, son of the founder of the English House and the first Jewish member of Parliament. The Queen replied, objecting to such a large increase, and went on to say, "But to make a Jew appear is a step she could not consent to. It would be very ill taken, and would do the government great harm." Unquote. In the next paragraph, she refers to the suggested creation of 2 Catholic peers, and rejects that scheme for reasons which are purely political and temporary. Lord Granville, the colonial secretary, answered the objections in a none too pleasant manner the following day. Quote, "The notion of a Jew peer is startling. Rothschild, le premier baron juif, does not sound as well as Montmorency, le premier baron chrétien. But he represents a class whose influence is great by their wealth, their intelligence, their literary connections, and their numerous seats in the House of Commons. It may be wise to attach them to the aristocracy rather than to drive them into the democratic camp." Close quote. It is clear from the correspondence published in Philip Guidala's The Queen and Mr. Gladstone, Volume 1, pages 197 to 207, that the reason Baron Lionel was omitted from the number of the new peers was the Queen's uncompromising opposition. She frequently refused to take advice when first submitted, but usually consented after a lengthy correspondence. In a letter of August the 24th, she repeated her refusal in these terms, quote, "But she cannot consent to a Jew being made a peer, though she will not object to a Jew baronet, and she is quite certain that it would do the government harm instead of good." Close quote. In a letter to Gladstone, Lord Granville refers to the Queen's, quote, "strong feeling on the subject as regards herself and the government." Close quote. In deference to that strong feeling, the ministers gave way. Gladstone returned to the attack at the end of October, and the Queen replied in a letter which must be quoted in full. Quote, "The Queen thanks Mr. Gladstone for his letter, and for promising her not to press the subject of Sir L. Rothschild's peerage. The Queen really cannot make up her mind to it. It is not only the feeling of which she cannot divest herself against making a person of the Jewish religion a peer, But she cannot think that one who owes his great wealth to contracts with foreign governments for loans or to successful speculations on the stock exchange can fairly claim a British peerage. However high Sir L. Rothschild may stand personally in public estimation, this seems to her not the less a species of gambling, because it is on a gigantic scale, and far removed from that legitimate trading which she delights to honor, in which men have raised themselves by patient industry and unswerving probity to positions of wealth and influence." Close quote. There seems, therefore, little ground for ascribing the Queen's refusal to anti-Semitism, as we now understand it. The notion was, quote, "startling," in Lord Granville's words, and time had to be allowed her to grow used to it. Her objections to Jews were social and religious. Certainly, she can have had no economic jealousy, which is often given as a reason for anti-Semitism through the ages. She simply could not regard Jews as fitted to join the aristocracy, and in this opinion she would probably have been joined by a large part of her subjects. There can be no question of hatred or of social theories, no question of inhumanity. Her actions in support of Sir Moses Montefiore show quite plainly she had all the prejudices of her years, and perhaps a few more, of her era, and perhaps a few more. The time was not yet ripe. To be more critical would be unfair. The question arose again in 1885. Unfortunately, it is not possible to ascertain the detailed views of the Queen at this time. Gladstone's letter of June 15, 1885, in which he suggested the name of Nathaniel Rothschild, son of Baron Lionel, who had died in 1879, as a peer, had not been printed in full either by Guadala or in the official volumes of the Queen's letters. We do not know, therefore, if any special reason was offered for the inclusion of his name, though the reasons for suggesting others was baronetcies are available. Similarly, the Queen's replies have not been published, though the whole tone of correspondence at this time on the subject of honors in Queen Victoria's Letters, 2nd Series, Volume 3, pages 668 and 677-78, implies that she raised no difficulties. The patent for the Rothschild peerage is dated June 20th, 1885. One is left free to doubt whether she had really changed her mind, or whether she consented because she felt it necessary to fall in with Gladstone's wishes on the dissolution of Parliament. Perhaps there is a clue in her attitude in a letter she wrote to Gladstone on her own initiative in December 1884 on the subject of an alteration in the terms of Sir Moses Montefiore's baronetcy. She wrote, quote, "The Queen wishes to mention a subject to Mr. Gladstone, which she has little doubt he will gladly assent to. She understands, though they have not asked for it, that it would greatly gratify the excellent old centenarian patriarch Sir Moses Montefiore, as well as all his belongings and the Jewish community, if the baronetcy were to be extended to his son of his favorite nephew, to the son of his favorite nephew who died 3 years ago, and which would otherwise be extinct when good old Sir Moses dies. In the case of Sir Anthony de Rothschild, the baronetcy was given so that his nephew succeeded to it. Sir Moses Montefiore is an excellent man, charitable to the highest degree, and universally respected, and the Queen would be very glad to pay him this mark of respect." Close quote. As her natural kindness and her regard for a good man would induce her to honor the centenarian Sir Moses, no definite conclusion can be drawn from that incident. Relating her attitude of the winter of 1884 to that of the summer of 1885 is a difficult matter, especially if it is remembered that Sir Moses had himself made his fortune on the stock exchange many years earlier. Such inconsistency impels one to feel that her real thought on the Jewish question can be best summed up in the famous couplet, "I do not like thee, Dr. Fell, the reason why I cannot tell." No other explanation can fit the situation. Her regard for Disraeli and Montefiore, her humanitarian efforts on behalf of oppressed Jews, her unwillingness to raise a Rothschild to the peerage, her objections to the Jewish friends of the Prince of Wales, are mutually inconsistent. They do not show any consistent anti-Semitism except of the social type that merely shows she was in line with the current ideas of her age and surroundings. That this is so is an important factor in assessing her ability and her influence in the only justification for examining what is, after all, a very minor facet in a many-sided character, which had such power for good in the lives of millions of her subjects.